Hello and welcome to 3 Minute Gaming. I'm Nathan. Time to take up this games with your time and bandwidth. Today's game is Incision. Quake meets Silent Hill in this hard as hell boomer shooter. Is Incision worth carving out time to play? Incision is currently available on PC where it is on Steam Early Access. Should you want to pick it up, it will cost you $15, and the game in its current state has one episode which will take you around 3 to 4 hours to beat depending on difficulty. So what exactly is Incision? Well, it is a boomer shooter with a PS1/Quake era aesthetic, most notable for its high difficulty and crazy visuals. The world has been transformed into a hell of flesh and metal, much akin to the nightmare worlds of Silent Hill, or what would happen if the Mechanicus from 40k took over everything. And you've got one goal: beat levels by killing everything on your way out. Incision's core gameplay I describe as fairly simple. You make your way through fairly linear levels, blasting everything along the way while activating buttons to open new paths. However, beyond its aesthetic, the game shines in its approach to your arsenal and how you'll need to master it to conquer the game's high difficulty. In a surprise twist of fate, this game actually gives you the best weapon in the game as your starter, the revolver. While basic firing it is ho-hum, there's a trick. Well, if you alt-fire, the gunslinger twirls the gun around, and should you fire when it glows, the bullet does, 40 times more damage? Enough to turn most basic enemies into paste, generally. This quirk teaches you that secondary fires are important, and that rule persists throughout the game, as every weapon has an alternate fire that you will need to learn to survive. The shotgun, while standard, can fire a slightly less accurate 4-round burst when you really need to make space. The machine gun chews a bunch of ammo to fire a flame grenade, which does low impact damage, but enemies burn for a long time. And there's even a weapon that doesn't use traditional ammo, but instead blood you gather by jibbing enemies nearby and getting drenched. Every weapon's design feels deliberate and intentional, which is good because this game's enemies aren't fooling around. None of them are hit scanners. Each of the projectiles can be dodged, but the projectiles deal high damage and enemies are very aggressive. Enemies are all unique and as such require prioritization of targets when tossed into arenas. As mentioned, this game is intentionally very difficult, though it does offer some good variance in difficulty modifiers. Basically, you can adjust enemy projectile speed and damage, and that's it. While hard, I found the modifiers adequate to get the game to a level where it never felt punishingly unfair, but rather a satisfying challenge. And of course, the game's aesthetic is worth mentioning, as it's another boomer shooter with a retro-style throwback similar to Dusk, both an emphasis on its horror-themed environments and flesh-based objectives, which make it stand out quite a bit. So overall, Incision is a difficult boomer shooter with some deliberate design, great aesthetic, and a kick-ass soundtrack that I forgot to mention, so I'm mentioning it now as the bridge to the next section. So what do I like about Incision? Well, as mentioned, its arsenal of weapons are fantastic, and because of the difficulty, learning each weapon's versatility with both primary and alt fires is a delight, making you always feel both empowered and vulnerable as you boom and shoot. Additionally, this aesthetic is incredible, with the graphics being a bit PS1 mixed with Quake, and the fantastic flesh meets metal aesthetic you get from, again, Silent Hill Nightmare worlds, all gels together fantastically well. I love the way this game looks. And lastly, the shooting feels absolutely fantastic, very important for this kind of game, and since every enemy shoots a projectile, your fast movement allows a high skill ceiling to avoid enemy attacks while weaving in and out of combat, making every interaction a duel that stays engaging to the end. When it comes to the bad, I do think the difficulty at times is a bit much, and while the dev is open about how he wants the game to be challenging, don't expect him to make it any easier. Using the current difficulty modifiers, I was able to find a way to play the game that I had a lot of fun with, but if you don't like hard games, maybe this one's not for you. Additionally, the lack of mid-level saves or saving in general is a massive hindrance. The dev has said this is a technical restraint, and the game has a life system to help counteract it, but considering the game's difficulty, I found that very frustrating. And lastly, some of the later maps, particularly the one after the first boss, are too long and maze-like for the aforementioned lives and no save system. While I didn't get lost often, when I did, it was much more frustrating because I knew I couldn't save and come back later, which makes me think this style of gameplay is better suited for smaller, more concise maps. As you know, I rate games here on a 3-point scale: must play, maybe consider, don't bother. I absolutely think Incision is a must play and is a hidden gem on Steam. It is a phenomenal achievement for just a single dev, and an exhilarating boomer shooter that already has a surprisingly solid foundation. I'm excited to see where this game goes in future episodes, and I cannot recommend it enough for those who enjoy this style of game. And that's all I have for you today. Thank you so much for watching. If you heard of Incision, do you enjoy boomer shooters? Let me know in the comments, but regardless, make sure you go give it a look.